So, welcome Eva, Adrian, welcome everybody. We have a really exciting talk about My, is it all AI? With a title like that, it must be a cool talk. To quickly introduce our panelists here, we have Adrian Locher. I apologize for my German pronunciation in advance, who indeed is the founder of Merantix, which is an AI investment platform, incubation platform, etc. And before that, he's founded more than 10 companies over 20 years. So lots of AI in his background. And we have Valerie-Grferer.
Very good.
Thank you. Who is the founder and CEO of Morphais, which is a deep tech VC fund that doesn't only invest in tech, but actually uses AI and tech to identify companies, which is quite forward-thinking in a very network-based business. And we're going to talk about AI. But before we do that, I want to ask you guys, what did you want to be when you were younger?
Like it. The click thing.
He invests in tech.
You could not think I'm in tech. I wanted to be a builder of things. So I think I first started with wood, building stuff out of wood, and then I discovered electronics and computers. And then I wanted to be something in computers, I think. So I was building computers. And then I started to build software, and then I started to build companies.
Cool, there's a clear line. I like it.
Yeah, I love the clear line. I think I wanted to be something else every second week. Like from dancers to, I once wanted to become a priest. And then I really, for a long time, wanted to become a pilot, because I love traveling. Well, I thought that I would love traveling. How about you?
I wanted to become an F-16 pilot when I was younger, and now I invest in companies, so, you know, it's all the same.
How life happens.
I wanted to do that too, but my mother told me no, I'm not allowed to become a pilot, so yeah.
You have a wise mother, and here we are. Yeah, on the AI topic, what I wanted to start with, to sort of throw in a little bit of a quote. Adrian, I read a quote of you saying that you think that 90% of the AI companies out there at this moment will fail. Encouraging words for all the potential founders. Could you explain to the audience a little bit why you think that and what you mean by that?
Yes, it's a provocative statement, of course, but I do think it is true, and not only because usually the failure rate in startups is very high, so I myself failed a couple times, so I think there's nothing wrong about that. I do think when you look at the current landscape, as with all the hypes right now, I do see a lot of companies pitching, oh, we're gonna do X, Y, Z with AI. As companies were pitching, oh, we're going to do X, Y, Z with blockchain 2 years ago. And I think fundamentally what the problem is that the majority of cases are not big enough for being a venture fundable case. Majority of things that I see are features, and features should be built by the incumbents in any market. So that is the reason why I'm saying this. And fundamentally, and we can talk about that a bit later, the way we look at AI companies is not a different one than I would look at any other business. So it's about the business case, defensibility, moat, flywheel, network effects, product market fit, product founder fit, and so on.
Yeah, and what do you think then it is about AI that suddenly you see all these companies that are either only a feature or a too small market? Why is that happening now?
Well, obviously it's a huge hype that got kicked off a couple months ago. And you know, I think the hype is largely there because all of a sudden this massive technology that has been around for quite some time now became much more understandable for everyone, simply because someone who's very smart just put an HTML framework over this massive technology, and all of a sudden conversations can be held with the machine. And I do believe that conversations are the oldest medium that people have, and therefore seeing a machine doing this kind of conversation also is kind of shocking. So that's when people started to realize how massive the technology actually is.
Yeah. How do you reflect on this, Eva?
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 short reactions. I think one, we also we see 20,000 companies every year at Morphais screening only Europe, and we have seen a massive increase of the companies that call themselves AI, and then you look into them, and it's a buzzword that's out there. And the question is, what do we refer to as AI? I think it's also a very dynamic term that generally probably refers to the most recent and the most sophisticated technology we have, and what AI was 5 or 10 years ago is completely different to what it is today. So I think question of definition here. Second reaction, looking at numbers, 80 to 90% of companies generally in venture fail, right? So 90% is more or less normal.
It's not that much of a provocative
exactly,
statement.
And what is failure, right? You said that.
I should have said 99%.
Exactly, yeah, because then the question is, why would AI companies be different to non-AI companies, right? And I also love, by the way, the reaction on failure generally. I think in Europe, in Germany, we have a very negative attitude towards failure. While we know if companies or founders fail 2 or 3 times, they are most likely to build an outstanding company that changes our lives for our ecosystem. And maybe one last point to why would potentially AI companies be more or less successful. I think looking at reasons why companies fail, one is founders fall apart. That's, AI companies are equally likely for them to happen than non-AI companies. Another is that companies cannot show large enough margins or, in time profitability. And here I think, that AI applications potentially are at least less likely to fail as severe because they are less labor intense. They can use the R&D of infrastructure AI companies and have a much quicker go-to-market. So they may fail as often, but potentially less severe.
Cool. So basically what I hear you guys say is even AI is amazing and it can do a lot of stuff, but it's not a magic sauce that will suddenly make your company amazing whatever you do, which sounds sensible. So if we look at all these AI companies that suddenly emerge, where do you guys see a lot of AI companies emerge where you're actually thinking, I don't see a lot of potential here?
You want to start? So I would maybe first start with what is it we look for when we look at companies, and what is the kind of special mode we wanna see. So as I mentioned earlier, we don't like to invest in a feature, but we like to invest in a product, and we like to invest in a very specific form of product. It is the category-defining product. So we love to invest into companies that create new categories, new markets, new business models that haven't been possible before the technology was there. And just to give you a bit of an idea, what I mean here is when you look at the largest tech internet companies today, majority of them has built their own categories, whether it's search, social network, streaming. It's all areas, categories, markets that haven't been around before the technology would actually work. And so the way we look at machine learning AI is in a similar way. You'll see new categories, new markets emerging through the existence of the technology. And I might end with a very concrete example from our portfolio. We have a breast cancer screening company that is providing breast cancer screening services to the customer in emerging markets, where it's a population-wide screening that can only be done because there's technology, because there's not enough doctors in these emerging countries to actually provide this kind of service. Now with technology you can, so you're building your own new market.
Yeah, very clear. So I think that's very clear on the where do you like it and where do you want to see AI. But where do you see, just to pressure you a little bit, where do you see it at the moment where you don't like it, where you're like, this doesn't make any sense?
Can I give this question to Eva?
Sure. The next one, that's how we play. No, I mean, I think I try, and I think that's a big problem in investing, that we tend to invest in what we like. apart, I mean, now you mentioned a framework. Obviously, Merantix doesn't, but like investing is very gut-driven and emotional, right? And I try to not look at what I like, but I understand your question. So I think where I see difficulties is
it's a better way of putting it.
Markets where it is very difficult to have a defensible USP. So we see a lot of, in health tech, you had one example, we also see a lot of companies doing radiology at that point in time. And, some have a better network in Eastern Europe, 2 hospitals. Some have unique data in Germany, access to unique data in Germany. Who is going to be the category winner here? Because, of course, in like 10 years from now, we will not see doctors in front of pictures being like, this is cancer, right? To be a bit sharp here. And there I find it very difficult, I would say, to make decisions where it's unclear what the USP is or how unique the data points are of these companies.
And maybe also to answer your question, of course, so we also divide the world into application layer and infrastructure. And where we currently don't like to invest is in infrastructure. Not because we don't believe in that space, and also I hope that some of them are going to making it and also define kind of AI sovereignty when it comes to Europe and not just leave the market to the US players. It's just a very hard space that you won't see many companies in the end. So when it comes to infrastructure, I don't see a reason why machine learning general providers will look much different than cloud computing today. So there will be a few, 3, 4 large ones, and then there might be niche ones in a very specific vertical that is highly regulated, and therefore Amazon, Google, and Microsoft just simply don't care enough to serve that. But a lot of these infrastructure things are just not defensible enough, and that's where I do believe, even though you might see amazing technical capabilities, it still isn't something I would invest in.
Clear? What do you think?
Good question. Okay, so I find it very challenging because you see so many Gen AI companies popping up now that build sort of a shell around OpenAI and then say we're gonna conquer the world, but then they lack all the, to put it strongly, they lack all the business fundamentals you talked about. So there needs to be a USP, there needs to be either access to proprietary data, there needs to be a fine-tuned model, there needs to be all the normal things startup need, which is founders with expertise in the market they're building, a sensible go-to-market, etc., etc., etc. And at this point in time, I mostly see that, for instance, in automated sales outreach, for instance, right? Where you have I think I've seen at least 25 automated sales outreach pitch decks in the last few weeks, which doesn't mean it's not a good business model or there's not a company that will succeed here, but it does mean that if you see a lot of opportunistic people there, I think, which is not a bad thing, but then you wonder, is this VC fundable? Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Maybe as another point, do you feel like because AI is such a technical product, do you feel like investors need to have technical AI experience to make good AI investments?
Shall I jump? I love that question because it's a yes and no answer. So do I think, like very specifically, especially if we look at AI applications, less maybe tech-heavy cases of AI, generally do you as an investor need a background there? I would say no. Adrian just mentioned it, like what is he looking at? It's very like business-oriented, it's a framework that we have that as with a business background we can answer yes or no. But I do think that, and that's the no, I do think 90% in Europe and Germany of investors have a background in business or law. In the US that number is smaller. And I do think, if the future generation, much more than the past generations of entrepreneurs, are tech entrepreneurs. If, you mentioned it, deep tech is one of the categories where people, entrepreneurs solve problems of our times that haven't been solved before. And those are very technical founders. Then shouldn't a new generation of VC investors also be more technical? To mirror them. We know that as investors, we like to invest in people who are alike, right? So I will understand a female founder more likely than a male investor in most of the cases. Women invest double as often in female founders as men do. And as a technical founder, and we know this, like mathematicians, physicists, like to speak more to investors who understand a bit of what they are doing. I mean, you guys have a big engineering team as well, so that makes so much sense. And that is why I do think the future, certainly we should have a more diverse, generally, set of investment managers to also make more diverse investments.
I love panels when you can disagree, because then there's a more lively discussion. Unfortunately, I cannot disagree to you.
I was excited about the answer.
No, I mean, the way we see it is definitely that, yes, you need to have a technical background for a good judgment call, especially on the early stage. So I think late stage is very different. But early stage, I do think that the future will bring more and more specialized investors who cover one domain. Because as a generalist, investing in AI, AR, VR, crypto, and whatnot, I need to have domain specialists in all these topics, and that's just simply not going to be possible. So when I look into our engineering team that we can sometimes borrow, because it's one of our portfolio companies who has a very large engineering team that is offering service to corporates and SME, and there I basically, whatever the question is, I have at least 1 or 2 PhDs from exactly that kind of field. So for me, the tech due diligence then is like half an hour max, and I know whether it's going to be possible or not. And that judgment, of course, is extremely valuable, because what I don't like investing in is what we call too much of a science risk. And what I mean by that is if something technical is not yet working stable in lab conditions, then you're also not going to be able to build a stable real-world product, and you might be too early. And being too early, as we all know, in the startup world, is also means you're going to run out of money at some point without being able to prove your fundamental points that you wanted to.
Yeah, nice. It's deadly.
And you agree because you have a background in neuroscience.
I couldn't disagree. So one thing I'm thinking about is this AI boom. It's clearly a boom, right? If you open LinkedIn, suddenly everybody's an AI expert. Like everybody was a crypto expert a couple of years ago, and big data had big promises a couple of years ago, and there was the .com boom, etc., etc., etc. So maybe the question is, how do you reflect on this, and what do you think is going to stick from this hype?
The good thing about a hype is that there's a lot of new things coming up. There's a lot of people that get drawn into it and are generally moving the field forward. If you think about the early days of the internet, what fundamentally changed between the 90s and 2000s was in the 90s, when you wanted to become a developer, engineer, which I myself was kind of doing, trying to build some things. You need to be able to code Perl, Java, and all the really complicated, or C++, all the really complicated languages. And then all of a sudden, PHP with increasingly low-code, no-code frameworks, Python frameworks, Ruby frameworks came around, and the number of applications just exploded, which also meant the number of business models just exploded and gave this whole thing a huge uplift. And I do believe we're going to see the same in AI in the next couple of years, if not months, where there's lots of open source also going on that increasingly makes it easier to build solutions. And the thing is, for most of the economy, that is going to be amazing, because that means a lot of companies can actually apply the kind of technology that before was limited to a few really insane engineers, and all of a sudden everyone with a little understanding of code can actually do it, and that means acceleration in the field. Whether that's positive for the venture space is a different question then, but in general it moves technology ahead, and when technology is moved ahead, humanity is moved ahead. That's why I think it's very positive.
So maybe to build on that, and we're also almost out of time, in a space that moves so quickly, does it change how you make your investment decisions? If in 6 months there could be another large language model that's even better than GPT-4?
Yeah, I mean, maybe like, what do we what helps us as investors to make quick decisions in such a heated market is certainly a framework, and you've mentioned this at the very beginning of this panel, right? So, like, we look at, do we believe this founding team can run a public company? Do we believe that there is a market big enough as for a venture case to evolve, or a problem big enough? Do we believe that the tech is defensible, right? These questions, I think, and at Morphais, what we try really is to, after the first or second conversation, say no, and say no more quickly, to companies, A, to save their time, because, you know, I think we should really value the entrepreneur's time, and B, so that we have more time to look into the companies that we find fascinating and that support our thesis or that work within that thesis. And that is a very quick answer, so because we are running out of time.
And I think we are out of time. I think it's time for questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe one more question then in the meantime. Because you say in the mental framework there's technical defensibility, but that seems very difficult if the tech is changing so fast.
You mean as in how...
Because the models are developing so
yeah,
quickly.
and I, you know, and I'm curious to see what Adrian says about this as well, but I think that, you know, if we invest really pre-seed, right, like we already spoke about having somebody technical on board who has an idea of like, what's the newest research, how defensible is that, yes or no, but I think on top of it, it's like, and that's very generic, but we should understand, do we believe this founding team is very talented, and we can do this not only based on gut feeling, we can use metrics to measure that, that's, you know, why we develop technology to try and do it, and like increase visibility out there, try and see everything that's happening, and use tech as investors, AI ourselves, so that we can, you know, filter very strong founders from less strong founders. And then I think, you know, if I knew what is the best technology out there and I knew how to build it, I would, you know, do it myself and not, you know, that should be the entrepreneur doing. But maybe you have anything else to add on that? No?
How can AI startups compete with big tech that already have much broader distribution channels? For the existing products, like AI would be just an extra feature.
Well, if it's just a feature, they cannot. So if you're not able to define a new market, then you'll be crushed by the large players. It's not the case when the vertical is too narrow. So I would say there are always a lot of verticals that, you know, the large hyperscalers, as you call them, won't really bother to go in. So you can build a great niche there. But if it's a really big market and if you only have a feature, not a new market that you define, then you're not going to be successful.
Cool.
Check.
The question is, what is a successful business model for a Gen AI platform which serves AI features for AI companies? I think somebody's looking for a startup.
Yeah, I'm keen on the third question.
Yeah, the second one is a tough one because I just haven't seen a lot that I really truly believe in. And when I say believe in a long-term fashion, like, is this going to be a sustainable business model in a few years from now? Because, yes, of course, there are now myriads of YC companies popping out and building cool tech that they then sell other tech companies, and they get fast adoption because they have a good network and good access. But I just don't see how many of these will survive, because whenever a market in that sense becomes interesting, the large cloud providers will also try to serve it, and they will succeed because they have the distribution, they have the scalability to also do it. And again, there might be markets for niche, or there might be space for niche markets. But if it's really like broad set of features for basically everyone, horizontal, then there's going to be a few companies in a few years from now only serving that, and I don't see much space for startups.
And I think, you know, like we've both been on like a lot of AI panels in the past, and I think what we know is that we don't know a lot yet. Like there's so much that we, you know, cannot foresee. That's also, you know, because you ask about the hype. How is this going to develop? Like what will regulations actually do? Like how will they impact the business models here? And I think so. It is difficult to draw conclusions on some of this, given it's so novel and there's so many possibilities around it. Should I jump because I don't think we have a lot of time into the third question?
No, we're getting shut down.
We're done, okay.
Aggressively.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your attention, everybody.
Thanks so much.